Pacheco, and I am the Executive Director of Nurses in Charge. I am here with Angela Nelson. She is our Director of Global Communities, and she is actually on the ground in Asheville, North Carolina, and we are covering what live updates, what's going on amidst this devastation of Hurricane Helene. Angela, welcome. Welcome to the show.
Casey, thank you so very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for having me today.
Yes, thank you. I know you just got electricity back. We barely have Wi-Fi, so hopefully it stays put for us for this interview. But thank you for taking some time out. Many of our nurses, they have been calling, they have been asking, they want to know what's going on the ground. There's a lot of things happening in the news. So we were hoping you would just give us a little background as far as how things are in your area. But before we get into that, can you share with us your role in Nurses in Charge? You were newly appointed Director of Global Communities. What is that?
Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, I am honored first and foremost to be part of the Nurses in Charge and the Director of Global Communities. My role will be coordinating with the regional directors and ensuring that we stick with our mission of Nurses in Charge of making sure every nurse is seen, they are welcomed, they have a wonderful experience, and they are connected to the community, and they are nurtured, inspired, and cared for.
Oh, that's beautiful. That speaks to the culture right there. So you are a very pivotal person. You know, all of our directors who are coming on, we like to say director because someone who is a director is who gives guidance and direction as which way to go. So we're so happy to have you. You aren't a registered nurse, but you are fully in the health and wellness space. And we are so glad to have you with us, Angela.
Well, thank you so very much. Nurses are the lifeline, literally, and the front line of, every community worldwide. And without nurses, who brings you into the world, and who helps you transition on your way out and all in between. They see the very best of humanity at their very most challenging times and worst times.
Yes, yes. And Angela, I know you suffered several injuries, and we're not going to ask for you to go in detail, but we know that you can tell us a little bit about the experience of Hurricane Helene. What happened? Because it kind of just pivoted. It's really weird that it hit the mountains. It's a very strange trajectory. Could you share with us what's happening, what has happened, your story?
Absolutely. Well, and I will skip the climatology discussion right now on why this hurricane impacted us in an area that normally is considered a weather refuge, where we are normally not affected by this. But let's just say that it hit us where people were not prepared. A lot of people, anytime there's a natural disaster heading up in the form of a hurricane, most people will come here from Florida, Georgia, South Carolina. They'll come inland from the coast because we are in western North Carolina. So if you look at North Carolina on the map, it's a very long state, and it is hours to the coast. And so normally it's a safe haven. However, this Hurricane Helene just she hit the coast near Tallahassee at a Category 4 hurricane, and she continued on. And I honestly don't know what strength of intensity it was when it hit here because we lost all communication. So I knew it was Thursday, and the hurricane was coming in that evening. And already I was hearing things about devastation on the coast, and then everything was out. We had no electricity, no cell phone, no landline, and also no internet. And so completely cut off from any communications. I had no way of knowing if we were under a flood. I knew we were under a flood warning, that it was actually already flooding here, that our rivers had breached, but I didn't know the extent it would be. So everybody was pretty much staying in place until we had communications up. And that was part of the unfortunate situation that I think made things so much worse because people had no way of knowing what was coming.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I could just imagine we were all worried at what's going on, no way to communicate with you. How about your family? Was your family okay? Were they all with you? How was that?
I was actually by myself at the time. My husband was at a different location and he was at work, and I didn't hear from him for 2 days. We were
Okay.
unable to contact each other for 2 days, and it felt much longer. It was actually 2.5 days. I was going to say, but who's counting? I was. We had no way of reaching out to each other, and I tried my best to connect with him, but I knew the first day to stay off of the roads because first responders need to be on the roads, nobody else. And I didn't want to add to any of the injuries or anything that was out there. But little did I know that I would have an injury or two. We did experience flooding. I was waiting for my husband, and we had a plan to stay in place ever since the lockdown that happened about 4 or 5 years ago now, to stay in place here, and he would find his way to me. Well, there were roads that were washed out, and there were power lines down in the roads. And so there was no way that he could come to me, and he had lost all communication sources as well. So I actually traveled the following day, 3 towns over as best as I could, and amidst the devastation, to find some place that had Wi-Fi access. And that's when I saw all of the people outside with all their cell phones, and everybody was trying to get in contact with loved ones, let them know that they're okay, or to connect with loved ones that they did not know word of. And I was able to secure the last case of water at a small store before coming back home. And I wasn't able to travel that far at all because everything was just pretty much, you know, not normal, should I say. And people were
Mm-hmm.
trying their best, but you could tell people were in different stages of shock,
Mm-hmm.
confusion, and desperation. While some people thought it was a party, hey, okay, it's a hurricane party. So there was all ranges of emotions being experienced, and everybody, I was actually relieved to see people outside and coming together, but you could see everybody's heads were in their phones, trying
Okay.
desperately to get a signal. So I was unable to reach him at all. And I thought, okay, if my communications are down, they probably are down for him as well. I went back home. I slipped on the ramp. We have a ramp that goes up to the house. And I thought because of the flooding, I would use the ramp instead of the steps. I thought it was safer. Fell, broke my foot, and hit my head. I, my husband, I've never been so grateful to hear the boot scraper on the front porch. I could hear somebody cleaning off their boots on the front porch. And this happened. This is day 2.5, like I said, after the hurricane hit. 2.5 days later, I heard him at the front porch, and I thought, oh my gosh, it's either somebody coming to give me news, or it's him. And thank God it was him. My heart was like torn. I wasn't sure which way to go. And so I was so very relieved. And, he saw what happened to my foot, and we went to the ER, and the emergency room was full of people. And they said they had no way to transport people out because Mission Hospital, which is the largest hospital in this region, and they could not accept any incoming patients at all. And I was at a
What?
rural hospital, and they said there was nothing they could do for a head injury or heart attacks because nobody was being able to be airlifted out.
Oh, wow.
And so that was a very concerning time,
Mm-hmm.
of knowing there were so many people, and, feeling like, well, it's just my foot. I can leave and come back later. And they talked me into staying, and sure enough, it was broken. And they helped me with the pain, thankfully. And then I was able to, go back home. And though my thoughts have been with all of the people that weren't able to get the care that they so desperately needed.
Mhm.
Right before this happened, I see that you're sharing that Mission Hospital, had a strike right
Yeah,
before because, yeah,
Angela, that's kind of why we met. That's kind of what drew you to
yes,
Nurses in Charge, because you were really, just as someone who's not a nurse, you were really worried about the situation of the nurses in your state, in your region. You said that you told me, it was, you didn't mention the exact hospital, but you said that those nurses were not, the staffing wasn't good. Um, they were.
short-staffed. Short-staffed, lack of equipment, lack of professional, well, not professional, excuse me, specialty teams. And
Mhm.
then because of the hurricane devastation, they couldn't get people in to form the specialty team. So they
Oh.
weren't able to get people in that needed to come in, in the late hours of the night.
Mhm.
And I had a couple of nurses that shared different stories with me, and one of them will just say that said she was very scared. It's a very scary time for her because if there was anyone that had a cardiac situation, there was nothing they could do. There
Wow.
was
Wow.
no visibility. The helicopter that transports the most urgent of cases to Mission Hospital was not able to because Mission Hospital was full and could not accept any more patients, and nobody was flying. There was no flight. There weren't any flights for a week. Nobody could fly. And the
You,
devastation of the area. I mean, the roads were flooded. There were roads that were washed out, and so it was just a very, very scary time for everybody, and nurses included. And you could just see the stress and the weighing on them. Where you've got somebody say with the UTI that they can't, a lot of people coming in with I don't want to say routine, but things that aren't so complicated and taking up beds, and though they have a duty to take care of them, and
mhm.
then the people that really truly need help couldn't be accessed where they were, or they couldn't, they didn't have the equipment at that particular rural hospital, and they weren't able to transport them to the hospitals they needed. And
Mhm.
so, and I see somebody mentioned also, yes, Hurricane Beryl, absolutely. And I think about Katrina that impacted, we know what Katrina did, and they say that Hurricane Helene is now the second most deadliest hurricane, only next to Hurricane Katrina.
Wow.
And
You
we
know, and
remember all those people at the dome back then, and there was no dome left here. It's everything just was
oh
wiped out.
no.
All of downtown Asheville. Yeah.
Wow.
And still without power, still without electricity. And all of the nurses that are working around the clock, all of the first
Yeah.
responders, and many of them have lost their own homes, and many of them still don't know about their own families.
And that's kind of what we wanted to talk about, because you think about every nonprofit organization has their, not one person can serve the world. So every nonprofit organization has who they're looking out for. So usually you have like the Red Cross, and they're looking out for, those who are like really critically ill, right? Or they're really affected by the disaster. You have maybe United Ways looking out for the homeless. You have the animal shelters looking out for the animals affected by this. Nurses in Charge, we're here to look out for our nurses. We're here, we've gone through many disasters, we've gone through COVID-19. These nurses were already about to strike, they already were short. And now you think about them on the front lines, they are scared, they are going without, and they're putting people first. We are looking out for them. So many people, they may be wondering, well, what could I do? How would you say people could help, Angela? What are things they shouldn't do, first of all?
Well, first of all, I know a lot of people want to help, and their first thought is, let me load up my car, my truck, my van, what have you, and come up. And we are asking at least in the state of North Carolina, and I'm sure for other states that have been impacted as well. You know, there was Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and West Virginia. Stay off of the roads.
Hmm.
Please don't come to look at the devastation. Don't come to bring help at this time until you've coordinated with local officials on the ground. We have the Natural Disaster Center, we have FEMA, we have, like you said, the American Red Cross and the ASPCA. You're welcome to connect with these organizations as well as Nurses in Charge and sign up as a volunteer and let us know how you can help. However, we ask that you keep the roads clear because they are still literally going under a search and rescue and recovery. They're still recovering bodies. There's still many, many people unaccounted for. We are on the latest statistics as of today, right before this meeting, was that there's a death toll of 56 people in North Carolina, and Asheville alone reported 30 of those. There are still thousands of residents without electricity, especially in Asheville. There's still severe flooding. I'm not sure if you're familiar with one of our claim to fames in Asheville is the Biltmore House and the Biltmore Village downtown, which is a huge shopping area and a river arts district. They are still underwater, and there's still significant flooding across the region, as well as electricity down, power lines down. There are people forming mule teams to access people in the most remote areas. As you can imagine, the mountains have very narrow roads, and now the roads are gone. Only one way in, one way out. And there are people that have been stuck for a week with no communication, no help. I was reading a story about a young man that hiked miles and then hitchhiked a couple of the last miles to get to his elderly parents who have been stuck for a week and bring them food and water and let them know that, just hang in there, that now that the helicopters can fly, that somebody should be able to drop, care items to them. So the major interstates are still blocked for the most part. Interstate 40 is the main throughway. It is like a huge artery that goes across the country, and it's blocked due to mud, debris, and flood. And
Okay.
yeah, so and there's, I believe, from my latest estimates, at least 5,000 nurses that are employed in the regions that were hardest hit.
Hmm.
That's not all of North Carolina, and that's not all 5 states. But in North Carolina, the 14 areas that I've recognized as the hardest hit, there are at least 5,000 nurses that have been impacted. And again, we were already under a nurse shortage, already severely understaffed. I will stay out of the politics. However, I will say, and I know this in full confidence, that the nurse to patient ratio was unmanageable, and the shifts that they were demanding upon these nurses before the disaster was inhumane. And
So,
that's why self-care is so vital.
so Angela, I'm going to talk about these two things as we wrap up this conversation. Um, for the nurses who are out there, we were talking, it's like when a hurricane hits, you have everybody's eyes, everybody's attentions, but these nurses, they're going to need long-term support. So for nurses
Absolutely.
in charge, you gave us some really good suggestions. We're working with our teams to really not just, a lot of people are just giving money, and you were talking about there's actually a lot of scammers out there.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it does bring out the worst in people and the best in people. And there's always going to be those that are trying to take advantage of the situation. So definitely vet who you are giving to. You can even look at Charity Navigator and make sure that they are legit, or the Better Business Bureau. Don't just give to anybody.
Yes, and I think we're looking for practical ways. You are on the ground. If your health permits it, you will be seeing there's a lot of smaller churches who are giving out food. They're feeding thousands of people. There are a lot
Yes.
of people who are rising to action. So we want to make sure that that we are forming collaborations that can actually get to the communities, but that our communities are also looking out for our nurses and their family members. Because while they're working, I'm sure they want to know that their kids and their family, their loved ones are being cared for. So we will be doing collaborations. We've also worked with we're speaking. I made brief contact with Trish. She is the president of the North Carolina Nurses Association. So hopefully we can get some of our surrounding nurses associations and organizations to help us really come up with a plan for our nurses. There's a lot of practical things we can do. It's not just money, but we're calling. I'm going to put a form in the comment section of this if you're looking at the replay. If you are a nurse coach, a wellness, health and wellness coach, and you want to volunteer maybe some of your time to do wellness calls, you want to make your availability known. Some of these nurses, just think about the anxiety they may have. Some of them may have post-traumatic, some anxiety or stress after this. We want you to make yourself available, even if it's just 1 hour you can give or one phone call. We can be a connection for our nurses. If you can give donations, we will make sure that it gets into the right hands and we will have the proper channels, but we're also being very strategic in how we move. And Angela, I just wanted you to mention, you talked about wellness, how important it is for wellness. If we have any nurses tuning in from that region, do you have any things that you did to help yourself stay calm and to help yourself be grounded that you can share with these nurses?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When the number one feeling that I felt myself personally, and I feel like other people as well may be feeling, is helplessness. Even if you are a nurse and you're helping, there's so many people, and the news keeps telling us, how many people are being affected and how bad it is. And, that feeling of helplessness or even survivor's guilt can take hold if you're not careful. And you just have to focus on what you can control, and what you can control, rather than letting the negativity bias come in, is your mindset and your breathing and the ability to stay calm. And there were some things that I utilized. I focused on what I could control. So I said, okay, let's look at one little action. What can I do? And I started organizing the space around me as best as I could. I read 3 books. I was trying to read things that were positive. I was trying to keep a positive mindset. I was making sure that I was breathing and practicing meditation as I could, because I don't know about anyone else, but if I'm upset, I'll hold my breath, and so it's like, okay, let's breathe, because that's not feeding your brain. That's not helping you. Let's focus. And then finding gratitude. I know that sounds so hard to, but I was thankful that the house is still standing, that the trees did not come down on the house like they did in the last storm, which is another story, that I am alive, that I'm breathing, that my husband is safe, and that, we are together. And then the most important thing next to that is making sure I slept. So maybe I didn't have a way of knowing exactly, I did have my phone. I had my little battery banks trying to keep it powered, even though I couldn't use it for communication. I had downloaded a book, before the storm, and I was able to listen to that and keep positivity, and also make sure I maintained a sleep schedule. Even if I wasn't able to sleep, I made sure I tried to get as much sleep as I could, because if you neglect rest, then you have less energy and less balance overall. And while I was out of communication with my husband, I journaled. I had to get my thoughts out, and maybe I talked to myself a little bit too, because you have to have some source of communication. That's one of our basic needs. And so I definitely did that to help, just reflect on things that are most important in my life, and then how I can help others. Because offering emotional support as soon as the lines of communication were open, helping other people, can strengthen our own resilience. And
Mhm.
though we have to, take care of us first, just like they tell you on the airline flights, put your own mask on first, secure your own mask before you attempt to assist others. And as nurses often put everybody else in front of them. You know, it's their job, and that's what they're used to. That's their identity. However, we need to make sure we stay centered, calm, and connected as best as we can with ourselves and our self-care so that we can pour into others as well.
That is you have such good words, not just even for the nurses there, but for nurses here, because we're talking about pioneer nurses, so nurses helping other nurses. We're not waiting, but we're saying we as nurses can take action. And I love what you said. I love what you said, Angela, about focusing on what you can do, right? You can't, everybody can do something, right? And focusing on that really helps to ground you. Dr. Nyempu says she's calling out wellness coaches at this crucial moment for nurses to cope with the challenges they are experiencing during Hurricane Helene. That's the pioneer nurse. We're here to nurse other nurses. Amanda said, that On Point Rescue, they are rescuers. They have been activated for the disasters of the Carolinas, and they are deploying for mental health first responders,
Yes,
field, etc. Have you heard of that?
I have heard of that. Yes, and I'm very happy that they are coming in because mental health, I think, is on the front lines because in any disaster, if you don't have your mental health and you're trying to help others, that does impact your effectiveness, and we don't want our nurses to suffer anymore. You know,
Absolutely.
we need to focus on caring for our frontline staff because if we don't, then, who cares for everyone else? Nurses, and if we don't take care of them, then yeah, we're all at a loss. So in prayer, I also I prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed, and I that is a source of strength, and my tool for survival has been through my whole life, and that's definitely something that, like you said, focus on what you can.
Mhm.
Self-care as part of your survival, controlling what you can, and focusing on gratitude in your mindset, and just, doing everything you can.
Absolutely. As you touch on prayer, I just want to give a shout out to Nurses in Charge Faith Community.
Yes.
We know that the faith community is very strong in Nurses in Charge. And usually that's how we know about all these disasters. They are praying for the disaster in Nigeria, they're praying for the disaster in, actually, I didn't even know what was going on until I tapped into them and they said, we're praying for Angela and her family. And I'm like, what's wrong with Angela and her family?
Oh,
So they
thank
they are
you.
all, they pray for what's going on. That's what when I knew about Uganda, our contact there. So they really keep our global community together through prayer. And they were praying for you through this whole disaster. And the leadership in Nurses in Charge, each department, each community, it is just so amazing. And we're just here to do something different for our nurses. So I just want to say, Angela, um, you are very well, you are loved, you are cared about. Thank you for caring about our nurses. You are going through your own trauma, but you are helping us, help our nurses. So we are so grateful for you. Thank you for giving us an update as to what's going on the ground. I know a lot of people can't get to where you are, but we really appreciate you uh, serving with us. And you just started, but we
Yes.
appreciate
What
you. Love
timing?
what timing? What
It was
timing?
meant to be.
And as we grow and we go to different communities, um, what a start that our community, you experience Nurses in Charge from the get-go. and that you could spread that to the globe, to the nurses around the world. So
Absolutely.
thank you for everyone who's tuned in today. Thank you for your comments. I know I saw Amanda, Dr. Nyempu. Thank you so much as we go full on to launching Pioneer Nurse 2025, where nurses actually nurse other nurses. You will see us on. We will be talking. We will be talking about you. Angela, Dr. Nyempu put one last comment here for you. She said, God is healing you and sheltering your family. I am so grateful for that. Thank you, Dr. Nyempu. We are going to be on. We have a lot of initiatives. We actually want nurses to start talking and sharing their stories. So please stay tuned for some of these. Angela, do you have any closing words as I wrap it up?
The closing words would be with at least 5,000 nurses that have been impacted, and that's in North Carolina only. It's time for us to come together, sisters and brothers in healthcare, and support one another. And Nurses in Charge is leading the way for that. And whatever you can do, just being an ear for someone to listen to, or have a wellness workshop, or, volunteer your time just for reach out calls, that would be most appreciative. Because as you know, as healthcare professionals, oftentimes you hear everybody's stories and you're there for the tears and you're there for support. It's time that we support each other.
Yes, yes, yes. Couldn't say it better. Thank you so much, Angela. Thank you for everyone for tuning in, and we will see you on our next show. Thank you.